Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting premier podcast, the Mania of Wrestlemania. And we are moving forward into the next chapter of this series, dealing with WrestleMania 3. And I am joined by Baron Von Awesome, Mr. Pat Mullin. How do you do, sir?
Hello, everybody out there in TV Wonderland, brother. This is our first video Mania of WrestleMania, so this is going to be fun.
Yes, it is. Yep. I found a video actually of highlights of WrestleMania 3 that we can watch as we're talking for those watching on the video. And for those of you listening on traditional podcasts, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or what have you, it's the same show you've come to know and love. We did the Mania of WrestleMania 1, and we talked about a lot of basically like the transition from Vince Sr. to Vince Jr. and the coming together of the big WWF, the non-territory version of the WWF, the competitive with the territories WWF, and how that all led to WrestleMania 1. We covered the transition to WrestleMania 2 and the creation of Saturday Night's Main Event, the rise of from the AWA to WWF, the Heenan family, and the creation of the Hulk Hogan Monster Machine, or recreation from what he was doing in the AWA. And now we're here. I made my son watch Hogan versus Andre, and I was explaining to him, like, it's important that you watch this. Without this match, I don't know if modern wrestling really exists.
Without this match, son, I don't know if you're here today.
Well, that's debatable. But no, I really feel like, it wasn't quite financially make or break for the WWF, but certainly in terms of what we come to know as modern wrestling, I don't think we have it without Hogan versus Andre. What do you think, Pat?
Oh, no, I would agree. It wasn't make or break, but this is what can we be if we take another shot. If we lose on this, it's not going to be quite so bad. There wasn't the same level of risk involved as it was for WrestleMania in its initial conception. But this was kind of more, let's put it all out there and let's see what happens. This is the millionaire who bets $500,000 on black at the roulette table and says, "The hell with it. I think I got an idea of what I'm doing," and scores.
So a couple of things that they were looking for here. They were looking to break an indoor attendance record, so they needed a football stadium. Wrestling has done stadiums in the past. They did baseball stadiums, say they're in there. You have Bruno at Shea Stadium with Zabisco?
Yeah, and Morales and Stan Hansen.
Were there did the one in Texas with the Von Erichs, did they do stadiums too?
They did. They used actually where the Dallas Cowboys played at in Fritz's retirement match. He actually pinned King Kong Bundy in the end zone.
Mm-hmm. Nice, but
I
don't
think
think
they did run a stadium show for the David Von Erich Memorial Parade.
And I don't think any of them came close to the either imagined or real attendance of this one. But they used the buildings, is my point.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so football stadiums or soccer stadiums, just because of the length of the field, are usually the biggest stadiums you can find going. So it was easier to find a football stadium given the size of the NFL at the time, and even now. So that was
because of the size of the area needed for the competition, which would be the ring, and small area around it for production. Much easier to build up attendance with more seats on the field level. And
all right. So, that was step one, was find an arena. Do you have any clue, any insight as to, of all the stadiums you could have done in the NFL at the time, again, this is 1987, why they went with the Detroit Lions, the Pontiac Silverdome?
The Silverdome was one of the larger stadiums constructed during this time in terms of what it could hold at capacity. I think there's also the fact that, Detroit had been a strong wrestling city for a long time via the Sheik and Bobo Brazil,
right?
But that it had really seen a significant downturn as big time wrestling was essentially dead there. And it wasn't an NWA stronghold where they might have some pushback on the show they put out. So Detroit, home of the auto industry. At the time, it was doing all right.
They didn't quite turn into Mad Max times just yet.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it had to do with the size of it, the history of it, what they could do with a dome at that time instead of just being truly outdoors in the event of inclement weather helped.
Right, especially in the springtime.
was gonna say, as we saw later on at WrestleMania 29 at points.
Right. Even this past year in Tampa, with the rain delay and everything.
Yeah.
You're a halfway big football fan. Off the top of your head, and if you don't know, it's fine. It's kind of a quiz question. How many domes were there going in '87?
Oh, there's Silverdome, Superdome, as Hulk Hogan would tell you.
Yes.
They didn't have a dome at Brennan Byrne in Rutherford. They did not. I think there may have only been 2 or 3 at the time.
Okay.
So not
a lot of choices.
Right.
And then New Orleans was dried up at that point, or was it still big for what's his face?
Well,
Watts
was basically being phased into the Crockett buyout at this point in time. So you'd had an audience that was really probably more there for the NWA style and those names, but also too, the economy down there was starting to get really bad, where even people weren't even paying for hookers anymore, which was the keynote to let people know.
What a tell that your economy is sinking when not even the hookers can make money.
Yeah, I forget who told that story. I know it was Cornette, but I forget he was telling it in second person of like, yeah, you don't understand. When people aren't paying for hookers, it means they don't have any money.
Right. All right. So you figure not a lot of buildings to choose from if you're looking for a dome, since you're doing this event in the springtime. You're looking for an economy that's doing well.
Stable, if not exactly robust.
Yeah, at the very least. And you're also looking for an area that's geared towards the WWF style, and that you're looking for that audience, which is generally speaking the Northeast. So they landed promptly in Detroit at the Pontiac Silverdome. Coming out of WrestleMania 2, we have the Hogan Monster Machine. We have it with Bundy. We talked about he's had some matches with Stud. They were not spectacular. But they were there. We're eventually going to get to Andre. That's the next logical step. But I'm curious to know if there were any ideas between Bundy and Andre for the next big monster for Hogan. That if you're going to do a dome football stadium for next year's WrestleMania, was there anybody else they considered besides Andre?
Well, I don't know if they considered him, and he wasn't technically a monster, but someone who just left us a couple of days ago, Paul Orndorff, would probably have been the other guy at the time if they're choosing. Orndorff and Hogan had a very big feud in the summer of '86 into the fall, where they had sold out the exhibition stadium in Toronto at 68,000 fans, which at the time was the WWF's highest attendance record for any event that they had done.
And that was a non-televised event, correct?
It was non-televised. It was released later on home video. But to get it, you had to be there. And 68,000 fans in one arena is a lot. And Orndorff was as hot as a heel could get at that point. So had they decided to extend that feud and maybe go with it beyond the Saturday night's main event cage match, Orndorff would have been seen as a guy who was a logical pick for that spot, in my opinion. But if you're looking to set the attendance record and you're looking to do things that have never been done before, you have the 2 biggest stars in professional wrestling right there with each other. In one sense, the literal biggest.
Right.
Why not?
Was Andre talking about retirement around this time? Was he sort of looking at his exit and seeing there's a window of opportunity for me to go out on top, put Hogan over in a big way and be part of history? Was that in his mind?
I'm sure that was part of it. Andre at this time is definitely feeling the physical effects of his acromegaly and how it's taking a toll on his body physically. If you watch Andre in the early years of his career in the early 70s, and there's video available, doesn't look at all physically like he does at this point in his career. He's a lot of body mass in the torso and the thighs now versus when he was younger. He was a lot more athletically shaped and athletically inclined. But being that big, and not that he was necessarily taking crazy bumps or anything like that, but he's bumping. He's going on that size, having to hit the deck and get up and do it again. His back is a wreck at this point, really, really bad. That's why he actually started wearing the singlet, because he was hiding a back brace that he was wearing underneath it. And shortly before this, he had gotten an offer to do this movie called The Princess Bride, and saw that as a potential that he could break out into a feature film more. And he had done some parts here and there. He'd been on the $6 Million Man TV shows, Bigfoot, a lot of people remember. He has a small part in Mickey and Maude, the Dudley Moore movie. So he's not unused to Hollywood, but this was the biggest thing he had done as an actor. And to the point where people who don't know wrestling know Andre from The Princess Bride.
Right.
And I think he saw this as like, okay, I'm going to be able to transition out of this, and I still have something that I can do in the event I need to increase my income or take care of the daughter that nobody knew he had, Robin, and just run his ranch in North Carolina.
So the last discussion point I want to have on this, and then we'll jump into the match itself. We'll talk about the individual buildups as we go through each match, because there's a lot of laden story here with a lot of these. So we'll go through them. We don't need to go through them all ahead of time. We can go through them as we go through each match. But one of the things I did want to talk about, the story of the first two WrestleManias, and we had to have some long preamble discussions about them because we really needed to set the stage for what these events would eventually become. WrestleMania 3 is between WrestleMania 2 and WrestleMania 3. We talked about with WrestleMania 2, by that point, they really have their roster pretty full with all-stars. They started that transition with WrestleMania 1. They, at the time, and this was one of our big discussion points, was they were just starting to pluck from the different territories. They were just starting to pluck from Mid-South and Crockett and the Pacific Northwest, Memphis. They were, they were getting sort of the kings of each territory. It was just beginning in WrestleMania 1. And that show, what we said about it was, it's the show of they had the stars they had at the time, and that's what they went with. They went to war with the army they had. By WrestleMania 2, they've really built it up. But like one of the things we commented on at the time was WrestleMania 2 is happening at the time they're just getting everybody. So a lot of those people either aren't not on the card just yet, or they're on the card but in low positions because they just got into the company like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, we talked Jake, perfect example of that. Jake the Snake is a huge star at this point that we're talking about, but a year ago he had just come in, so he's wrestling George Wells in a squash match.
Savage had just gotten there, and so he's in a feud with George the Animal Steel, and he, and we were talking about how they put the title on him, they take it off Tito, they put the title on him, but he hadn't been there that long. And they were talking about maybe him in a main event spot, but they were like, there's some other stuff we need to do first. Just, they were testing the waters with him, but they weren't quite sure. WrestleMania 3 is a year-long television build of the All-Stars. And this is sort of a culmination celebration of, we now have the All-Star roster that we wanted to go into, to really take it up to the next step.
It's one of those situations where there's this groundswell and this build and everything is clicking at the right time, and you reach that zenith point of, here it is, we're going to lay everything out that we've done and feature all these guys, and it's going to be a spectacle that is probably never going to be lived up to again, at least recently, and it's cyclical. We've talked about that before. We'll see it happen again, but it's cyclical, and at that point, this is where we're reaching that zenith point.
Yeah, this is basically the Broadway opening of all of these people that we finally have a year or two build to everybody that's on this card, and I think that's the point that I'm trying to get at is when I remember thinking about this when we talked about WrestleMania 1 and 2 about how a lot of the guys on the card hadn't had that much television time on WWE's television. This is the first time almost everybody on this card is not new. They've all had time on TV. They've had time on, the TV itself is the biggest it's going to be at that point. So, it's not getting any bigger than this. It will eventually, but I mean, this really is like the culmination of 3 or 4 years of hard work and preparation. I want to take this opportunity now to bring on Chris Bailey. How do you do, Chris?
Hey, I'm doing great. Can you hear me? Just checking out all the audio here, making sure we're good.
We see you in the fortress of Chrisitude.
I told you, I kid you not.
Yeah, you've built a podcast palace. It's not like the dump behind me,
or the couch behind me with nothing on the wall.
I was going to say, or the green room that Pat's currently in.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna jump.
Pillows.
Nice.
we're going to jump into reviewing the show here, but Chris, I want to give you an opportunity here. Take a minute or two. You're going into WrestleMania, your thoughts, your anticipations, your beliefs, anything you want to start off with as we jump into the card itself.
Man, I'm grade 7, WrestleMania 3's fever pitch. Hogan Andre, the build to that, absolutely insane. I remember the Piper's Pit like it was yesterday. I was super pumped going into this WrestleMania. I'm telling you right now, I don't know if I was ever more excited for a wrestling event, especially here in Canada. I mean, a lot of different companies jumped on the promotional bandwagon. So we had like Hostess potato chips were giving away free Hostess wrestling stickers inside their bags. You had sports networks actually covering wrestling, on occasion, some of the big events. We just came off Hogan versus Orndorff at the C&E Stadium, which had 74,000 people, legit 74,000 people in attendance for the big event. So, I mean, wrestling is at a fever pitch. Hogan Andre is selling this thing. Steamboat and Savage are lying in the weeds in the background. And, buddy, this was off the charts for me. Couldn't wait.
All right. Our opening contest is the Can-Am Connection, who I would often confuse with Strikeforce in my brain. This is Rick Martel and the Z-Man. Tom Zink versus Cowboy Bob Orton. Not sporting the cast here, and the magnificent Morocco, who is a longtime staple of the WWE at this point. We had talked about him in the previous 2 shows. Pat, I think we had said, but by this point he's sort of on a downswing. He's not quite the featured wrestler, but he's so far he's made every single one of these WrestleManias, and he's in our opening contest.
Except one.
He wasn't on. Oh, that's right. We talked about him not being on one, but he had that long feud. What was it with Snuka, right?
He did.
Santana. So he had a Santana feud there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, both over the IC title. Feud with Pedro. Morocco's great, man. And even though he's on the downside of where he's being booked in this company at the time, he's still awesome. And he has a great podcast out now. Don Morocco's Magnificent Podcast. Definitely worth checking out.
Wow. Morocco has a podcast.
Everyone has a podcast,
and it is magnificent.
So real quick, why is Orton not wearing the cast at this point?
Well, Dr. Sigmund Ziff, who the world-renowned surgeon, now does brain psychotherapy, but also operates on forearms, believe it or not, was finally able to clear Bobby of his much maligned broken forearm and just give him a clean bill of health, which we were all concerned about for a long time.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris Bailey. So this match, you always want to start off with something hot, something that's moving. All competent workers. Rick Martel is great. I'll tell you, Rick Martel's body's looking pretty good here.
Oh, House of Fire! Look at that. He's starting up. I feel like that today. Just those legs are kicking, those arms are flying. Morocco's flying over the ropes. Holy cow! Rick Martel, House of Fire.
Martel can make a comeback, man. I love that guy.
Yeah, Martel,
I do too.
He would when he becomes the model a little bit later on, body looks a little bit differently. But here, man, he is young, he is spry, he is jacked. He looks like every one of the action figure wrestlers.
I love that we're calling him young, but he's been in for almost a decade at this point.
Is it really?
And he's also been the AWA World Champion prior to this for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But here he's plucky young babyface Rick Martel, who, by the way, was also a WWF Tag Team Champion 6 years ago.
Yes. And not only that, let's take with Tony Gurria. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Anyway, Can-Am Connection get the win here. Let me tell you about Rick Martel. I mean, he's partnered with Tom Zink, Minneapolis guy, House of Fire himself, beautiful, big, big jacked up stud, perfect compliment to Martel. And you got Martel who, like Pat said, I mean, 10 years probably into business already at this point, already a former AWA champion. And this guy is flying all over the place. This is where you actually get to see drop kicks that connect, ladies and gentlemen, not like the 1 foot rockers / Rock and Roll Express type deals. This was a great hot match to start with. I think the fans, especially the ladies and a few of the guys, love these Can-Amers here.
Yeah, Pat, any thoughts on this match before we move on? I mean, like I said, just pot opener, good, competent, fun.
Perfect foils for Can-Ams in Morocco and Orton, 2 grizzled veterans, but, very, very capable in-ring performers. I miss the Can-Ams. I know Santana is an infinitely better worker than Tom Zink, but there's sometimes where teams just have a chemistry that looks and appears right. Can-Ams were right, man. I only wonder what would have happened if Zink didn't freak out and just quit.
He was saying that I think he was getting paid less than Martel and called
According
somebody
to-
out on it.
According to Tom's Inc., that is the story. Don't want to dispute it because I don't know the particulars, and then Martel said something along the lines of he asked Hogan for help to get Zink a loan to buy a house because Tom was freaking out about it or something, and then eventually Tom just stopped showing up, and then they built to Santana and Martel striking with force.
All right,
Which I loved. Strike Force forever, baby.
So this match is about 5 minutes and 37 seconds. Again, good match to get the crowd going. The next one of Pat's favorites, Hercules Hernandez. Show him the shirt, Pat.
Yes!
Perfect. Versus, and I'm going to need an explanation here, Pat. I don't understand what happened. Billy Jack Haynes, who I remember seeing him on Superstars of Wrestling, and he was a jobber. He was.
I don't recall that.
Mid-card talent, not a jobber.
I was just thinking, am I thinking of maybe like confusing him with Barry Horowitz? And in my brain, Barry Horowitz and Billy Jack Haynes might have been the same guy. Straighten me out, Pat.
No, Billy Jack Haynes is one of, if not the biggest stars, sans Roddy Piper, to come out of the Portland wrestling territory.
Okay.
He's always wearing the Oregon trunks on his person. And a huge guy, legitimately very tough guy. But as Barry Windham once explained, they called him Billy Whacked because he was a little bit out there in terms of his mentality. And that mentality is kind of what cost Billy spots like here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in a prominent role in the biggest card of the year. And we don't really see a whole lot of him after. He's actually leaving in the fall of '87. But Billy, just a great look, a capable performer for a big guy, could move, was athletic. And even this match, I love this match. This is a great house fight that you can get to see a lot of in the WWF at the time because these two guys lay it in on each other. And both guys were accused of being body guys who needed to be kind of led around a little bit by someone. For whatever reason, these two had great chemistry and just clicked. And I think it was just because they both had the same mentality of, we're going to go and just go 60 miles an hour and try to kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
they did. They were laying shit in.
Yeah, there's a point where Hercules almost decapitates him with a clothesline, and I'm like, oh my God. And then you see they're about 6-7 minutes into the match. These are big guys. They're press slamming each other. And not like weak, like I have to struggle to get them up and press slam. Not clean. Billy Jack with a clean right up and boom, over. Hercules always with the more difficult press slam, which I always love, where you grab a guy by the back of the tights instead of grabbing him by the crotch.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to literally do a press and a pull and gets him up and fully extended and tosses him. This is awesome. This is two big hosses just beating the tar out of each other.
Yeah, no, I like this match. I just, like I said,
too.
You talked about, and I'll shift over to Chris in just a second, but you talk about how he was gone shortly after this. And I think that's why in my memory, he was a guy I saw in Superstars and he just didn't register. And I'm watching this. I'm like, wow, I can't believe a guy who I only saw in Superstars, not knowing his history, like is in this prominent match on WrestleMania 3. I want to, and I want to give
I didn't have a lot of the LJN toys, but I had Billy Jack.
Did you really? Oh, that's right. They did make a toy of him. They obviously brought him in and had ideas for him, and they wanted to feature him more. And this is what I wanted to ask you, Chris. And you can give your thoughts on the match itself. Jim Cornette talks about a lot of guys who came to the WWF because that's where the money was, that's where the opportunity was. But mentally, they couldn't hack it in the WWF for a variety of reasons. Like guys did a lot of fine. Guys did fine in the territories a lot of the times, even if they were mentally not totally stable, because the work schedule was not nearly as bad. What was being asked of you was not nearly as intense. Then they get to the WWF and the cracks start to show. These guys mentally just start falling apart. And I'm wondering if that was Billy Jack Haynes' story. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, number one, this match, Battle of the Full Nelson. So we got to talk about the build here. Like, Hercules is just coming off using the torture rack, most famously on Saturday night's main event against Hulk Hogan. So, it puts him up in the rack, jacks him up. But he enters in this feud, so Billy Jack Haynes uses the Full Nelson very effectively. I wouldn't say he was a jobber. He did win, his lion's share of matches for sure. And Hercules adopts the Full Nelson. And all of a sudden, he attacks him with Bobby Heenan in his corner on one of the shows, and bang, we're right here at WrestleMania. And like Pat said, this was two hosses going toe-to-toe. They decided they were going to lay it in thick and heavy. The only problem with this, it ended with a count-out, do-nothing finish. But this one actually got one of the few WrestleMania matches that got juice on the outside. You see Hercules right now coming out with that chain. And let me tell you something. He bruised up Billy Jack in this one. I'm telling you right now. But look at Hercules here. He is jiggity Jack, baby. Loved it.
Any thoughts on my initial question regarding, just guys just being guys out there who perfectly good in the territories, but they're you have to have a certain level of stability to make it in the WWE. Your thoughts?
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, Vince McMahon at this point is still just buying up people left and right all over the place. And he's got his eye on Portland. I mean, Piper, is in the business here, so he's pushing for these Portland guys as well. And Billy Jack was a big deal back in the day. So I mean, getting him as an asset here was a big deal. So I mean, house show wise, he was a pretty big attraction, especially when you get around, the Portland areas and all that type of stuff. So,
Billy also initially got signed in '84, but decided it wasn't the right time for him. He wasn't ready. So they wanted him as far back as then and had him under contract. I remember there was a vignette of him riding the horse, a la Tom Laughlin as Billy Jack from the movie.
I wonder if Vince has any insight, just if any thoughtfulness regarding he's ever sat with Pat and just said, "Gosh, I wish more wrestlers were sane. We'd have the best company ever if more wrestlers were not lunatics."
I think there's a pot in the kettle laughing somewhere about that.
Well, we can just be thankful he's not killing people here. That's all I can say.
Speaking of killing people,
there's a story for another. Oh, Mark's not familiar with that one. We'll let Mark do the research on that one.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just gonna move on here. One of my favorite matches of WrestleMania 3 for a variety of reasons. Hillbilly Jim and the Haiti Kid with Little Beaver.
Little Beaver. Say it again.
Little Beaver.
Yes.
Versus King Kong Bundy, your main event for WrestleMania 2, who is joined by Little Tokyo and Lord Littlebrook in a 6-man tag. What's hilarious to me about this match, and again, this is coming from my what was it? Uncle Elmer versus Adrian Adonis. I raved about that one. Just the size disparity. Obviously, we have 4 midgets, and we have Hillbilly Jim and King Kong Bundy. It's a short match. This is very long. But I love the carnival atmosphere of this. I love the midgets took up most of the time doing all midget spots.
They hit the rowboat spot.
The rowboat.
This is so much fun. This one. I thought, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't there another thing where Bundy actually splashed one of the midgets?
He might have done it another time than this, but in this one, he most assuredly drops an elbow on Little Beaver.
He does. That's the highlight of this match. He fucking killed Little Beaver. But what's even better about this is Hillbilly Jim cradling the midget as he walks out oh, no, like it's his baby.
Like it's the cover of Crisis on Infinite Earths with Superman and Superhero.
Well, Little Beaver looks even worse because the guy's barefoot, so it looks like he's holding literally a small child in his hand.
Yeah, and Little Beaver's 60 years old at this time too.
So.
If you're just listening to this, go back and find, go on the cock, get on that cock, and find this match. Just watch this match. It's so good. I mean, modern wrestling takes itself so super serial. Man, this was so much fun. I don't even care. And I'll talk more about this with Hogan and Andre. The work rate snobs who look at this and go I hold my nose because it's not, it's not deep arm drags and chain wrestling and whatnot. Hillbilly Jim versus King Kong Bundy and 4 midgets is what wrestling is all about for me. You know what I mean, Pat?
I know exactly what you mean. It is all for you. No, but the best part of this match is the psychology of Bundy just hurt one of our guys. No, midgets unite. Let's get them. And they all
they formed Voltron.
Yeah, exactly. And we're saying midgets because that's the nomenclature that was used at the time.
Yes,
we understand they're little people. At the time, it was billed as midget wrestling, and we loved every minute of it. It was entertaining. I miss it to this day. I would love to see a comeback of these guys in some way.
Bob Uecker, he said something in the commentary, and then was just no, there's a bunch of midgets around. I almost died laughing.
Oh boy,
Uecker, my favorite WrestleMania celebrity ever, by the way.
He's the best.
Here comes the big slam. Oh, Little Beaver he got canned. He was thrown from the ceiling.
Dump like a sack of trash.
God, here comes the elbow.
That is a 300, 400-pound man dropping on a tiny human.
Jesus.
I'm going to tell a great little beaver story that Bobby Heenan told me once.
Okay.
So they were doing a mixed match, and Paul Orndorff, I guess, was the heel in the situation where he was working with him, and they were going to do a spot where he slams Little Beaver a la Bundy.
Mm.
Little Beaver liked to play a rib on guys when they would slam him, that he would just grab their junk.
Boy, if I had a nickel for every time a midget grabbed my junk.
So Bobby Heenan explaining to Orndorff, no, it's just that he has an inner ear thing, and he has to do that so he knows where he is, and he can keep his direction. And Orndorff goes, I don't care. If he does that, I'm hitting him. In straight Paul Orndorff, Brandon Bull fashion. So sure enough, they get to the match, they do it, pick him up to the spot. Little Beaver grabs a hold of Little Mr. Wonderful, and Paul Orndorff slams him. Beaver gets picked up by Orndorff, and Orndorff just uppercuts him in the face and lays him out.
Oh,
Mr. Wonderful, rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Paul Orndorff. Chris, any thoughts about this match? Any history you want to talk about here? If not, we'll move on.
No. Listen, this was just a fun affair. I mean, literally inconsequential. I love when the midgets form Voltron and take out Bundy. It was the big highlight of this. This is a WrestleMania moment, so that clip will live forever of Bundy dropping the elbow on poor old Little Beaver there. So
killed him.
That's the big takeaway on this one. So.
I feel like they were doing this on the house show loop because I remember a match at the Nassau Coliseum, and it might not have been all 6 of these guys. But I do remember there being like a house show loop 6-man midget match featuring at least maybe Bundy, maybe Hillbilly Jim. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But I feel this might have been like we've been doing this 6-man midget match for a while now. Let's get it on the big stage and then let's move this along.
I still can't believe that slam Bundy did. Like that is absolutely
that was stiff, man. He's like, if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna do this, you're going down.
Oh man, let's go to the king.
Yes, Harley Race. I'll move with Bobby Heenan and the Fabulous Moolah versus the Penthouse Dog. Pat, let me see you roll your eyes.
I was going to go with the junk food dog, but okay.
That's right, the junk food dog.
At this point, he's right on the money. He's got like 3 score bars and 2-liter Coke in him at this point.
Yeah, no, we're making fun of the Rock's stupid show.
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
So this is less
I haven't
than
watched
5
enough of it to understand the reference.
This is
Penthouse Dog is the Junkyard Dog's moniker in the Rock show.
Or that's what he wanted it to be. So this is a loser must bow match. Pat, real quick, talk about how like the whole King thing came about because it's it starts out as a tournament, which eventually becomes the King of the Ring, and that's how we ended up with our first King of WWF.
Yeah, so they did a tournament in '85 for a one-off at a house show in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which would be the regular home of it going forward as just an event special. Don Morocco actually won the first, but when Harley came into the WWF in 1986, they needed a way to recognize this all-time great, this NWA champion, without recognizing him as he's the former NWA champion type of thing. So they used the King of the Ring as a platform to not only get him over as the winner of the tournament, but also give him a gimmick going forward as to why he was the king of wrestling, and that's why he carried it forward. And we're going into WrestleMania 3 with the stipulation that the loser has to bow between him and the JYD because as part of his gimmick as the king, after he squashed somebody, they would have to bow at his feet, and normally it would be Bobby Heenan grabbing him by the hair and forcing him down. He gets into the program with the JYD because Terry Funk quits because he's tired of working with the Junkyard Dog who doesn't want to move. And
yes. this is not Mid-South Junkyard Dog who was mobile and a wrestler.
This is the paycheck dog.
Yeah, this is the cash and checks dog.
Yes. So yeah, and out goes one former NWA world champion, in comes another, and Harley, who just does whatever he can do to try to get things over. But Harley at this point, not his prime form, a little older, a little slower. Dog not in his prime shape, a little fatter, a little rounder, a little balder. Still over as anybody's business, though. Everybody loves the JYD.
He was one. This should be no surprise for people who have listened, longtime listeners, of this podcast and my enjoyment of certain cultural elements in our society. I was a huge Junkyard Dog fan.
Me too, man.
I could not be.
Given a choice between Hogan and Junkyard Dog as world champion, it would have been Dog 10 out of 10 times. Absolutely. And I was so mad he lost this match. I was like angry young Mark. This is 87. I'm 11. I don't think I was madder as a child than when he loses this match. I was so
with
pissed.
a beautiful belly-to-belly suplex, too. Look at Harley just getting that win right there.
Go ahead, Pat.
Was that it?
That was the finish. That was the belly-to-belly and the 3 count.
Yeah, this is not a long match.
And nor should it have been.
So you were saying, yeah, he's on the downswing of his career. They put Dog and Harley together. That's where you were before I interrupted you.
Yeah, as basically the stand-in for Terry Funk, who just got tired of working with the Dog, who didn't want to do anything.
Okay.
And so Terry up and quits. They put Harley in. Harley a little bit more of a pro, but also needs the money because Harley had bought into the St. Louis territory, which had collapsed at this point, largely due to pressure from Vince. And so Harley's there dressed in a crown and a robe, and a lot of people thought it was ridiculous, but they ain't seen no polka dot yet, baby, have they?
Chris, yeah, this is a really short match. As Pat said, it did not need to be long. Neither one of these guys is in shape to go at that kind of NWA Crockett pace.
Also, he's probably just referred to Moolah as the penthouse dog, but
but I mean, if you're an 7 to 11-year-old child, this is the shit. This is a fantastic.
Oh yeah. Match. Let me tell you something, man. You got JYD is coming out here. You don't realize the pop that this guy's getting. I mean, he got a massive applause. And when you talk about, Piper's applause and Hogan's applause, JYD's was not too shabby either, man. He was over.
Is this not the definition of you don't have to do a lot to get over?
No, you don't have to do nothing. But let me tell you something. We'll go on from this match because, I was irritated like you were that JYD actually lost. But let me tell you something. In grade 7, people were getting the headbutt in that school place. I'm telling you right now because I was all about the headbutt. I would come up and go, bang. Yep, you were getting it in grade 7. Let me tell you.
In the headbutt chain of command, there's Andre, then there's the Dog.
Yeah, and then what, Haku?
Yep. Then would be Samoans.
Yeah,
then would be
just Samoans, huh?
Blanket.
We can say Pacific Islanders, but that wouldn't include Haku and Barbarian.
No, I mean not a specific Pacific Islander.
No, if you are of Samoan origin,
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. The Dream Team making yet another WrestleMania appearance. This is Greg the Hammer Valentine, or as Chris likes to call him, my avatar.
He's just getting warmed up, baby.
Only 20 minutes in.
And Brutus shut up, both these. And Brutus Beefcake with luscious Johnny Valiant, who, as more and more I see him in these early WrestleManias, the more he's becoming my favorite manager ever. just talking nonsense.
Oh yeah, complete
loudly. With Dino Bravo of Canadian Mafia fame versus what I did not expect here. I did not, because all I had known is the Rougeau brothers as heels, and they're in the face spot here, oddly enough. So
yes, sir.
Let's go on. Let's talk about that. The Rougeaus and the Dream Team, Pat.
Yeah, Rougeaus were brought in as baby faces because they were over huge in the Quebec territory, which Chris might be able to correct me at the time. Was it Look International?
100%. Yeah, it was international. Yeah, and they were massive. They were the standout team in Canada at the time, and WWE. It was a pretty big coup back in, especially in the Canadian territories, to get the Rougeaus. So I mean, you got a really, really hot team here coming out of the gate.
You look at that Quebec territory and who's on the roster right now: the Rougeaus, Dino, Rick Martel.
Yeah, exactly. Right there, boom. Like international wrestling was huge in Canada, and it had like a good TV presence as well. And you got to see all these people. So I mean, when you saw Martel and Dino Bravo was huge. He had black hair back in the day, and he was winning straps all over the place back then. So I mean, these were big deals. So,
all right. Anything else about leading into this match, or we're just Pat? What are your actually, let's stay with you, Chris. What were your thoughts on the Dream Team? Who Pat and I have commented in the past were not exactly spectacular. They were fine.
They were rudimentary at its best. I mean, Beefcake was literally being carried by Greg the Hammer Valentine, and when you're being carried by Valentine at this point, that's not a good situation to be in. So they're ready to break off Beefcake here. So, that's the reason why Bravo is going to be inserted into this particular spot in the Dream Team. And we're going to see a little bit later that, Beefcake's brand new face turn, which starts here in this match. And this is its reason for existing on the card. You'll see right here, as you see right away, you saw Beefcake accidentally hit his partner, and Bravo is irate on the outside. But here comes the Bomb de Rougeau, one of my favorite.
The flying teabag.
Oh my God.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
I saw him do that. Like I had no memory of this match ever existing. And so I'm watching this basically for the first time, and he hits the flying teabag, and I'm like, holy shit, man. That's a cool looking move. You know, the flying dick to the face. That's amazing.
More bag than dick, though. More bag than dick.
Well, whatever he caught him with.
Well,
The
it's
head,
Joe
the
Bujo.
bag.
We can't rule out how much dick is involved.
You want to give me a minute on this, Pat? On this match, Pat?
Just to hear their match to further into the angle of the breakup of the Dream Team and facilitate Brutus's face turn, which will be completed later in the night. But we'll reference that a little bit more because if you don't have the context of the show, Brutus's appearance later on seems very out of context. So we'll clear that up.
All right. Pretty good match though. Like I said, you know, they loaded this card up with a lot, and this is part of the a lot, but it's not appealing or uninteresting. I mean, like there was some fun stuff here. Again, another short one. This one was 4 minutes long. So moving on. All right, in one of your marquee matches and marquee feuds of the year, Roddy Piper in one of his many retirement matches. Who has more retirements, Terry Funk or Roddy Piper? At least from the WWF.
Terry. Well, for sure. WWF, it's close, but WWF alone would be Roddy, but Terry's the king of.
That's what I'm saying. Like
more of a run for his money.
Terry retired from wrestling dozens and dozens of times. Roddy Piper retired from the WWF dozens of times. So adorable Adrian Adonis, now going full drag, is in a feud with Roddy Piper, and this is a hair versus hair match. Pat, talk about the history here.
Well, when Roddy left to make his first movie, his segment Piper's Pit, which of course the talk of the town always, was replaced by The Flower Shop, starring adorable Adrian, as Jimmy would always announce him. And not only did he get the segment, but he also got Cowboy Bob as his bodyguard with pink hat. And when it was time for Roddy to make his return, Roddy was like, what the hell is going on around me? And this was to capitalize on the positive reactions that Roddy was getting even as a heel prior to him leaving. How do we maintain this? We'll put him against one of the most hated heels on the roster while still keeping his edge as a tough guy. So, of course, who's up for that? Adrian. Not only that, but they explained the split with him and Ace by him looking at Orton saying, what are you doing here? What happened while I was gone? And they really facilitated this quite well with the nuances. And it got to a feud where Roddy wants to show back, so they're going to do the Pit versus the Flower Shop. And it leads to all sorts of Morocco and Orton interactions, which is how they form a team, where Morocco's the interviewed guest and Piper basically just craps on him for trying to talk out of turn. Adonis attacks Piper. They injure his knee. And Adonis also starts doing a thing at this time where he's cutting opponents' hair for his own amusement. Mm-hmm. And that's the build to the hair versus hair match where they're going to mess with Roddy and they're going to cut his hair and all this stuff. On an episode of Superstars prior to this, Adrian was in a 6-man tag with the Dream Team against, I believe it was Lanny Poffo and the Killer Bees, I want to say. But at one point in time, Adrian calls for them to toss an opponent to the corner so he can give him a little snip. Well, it gets reversed, and Adrian's not looking, and he starts snipping off some of Brutus Beefcake's hair.
Oh, that's right. I recall that. Right on the money. Well done.
So that adds to what we get going on here a little bit. But we get the hair versus hair stipulation. We get this heated buildup with Piper and Adonis injuring each other. Piper destroying the Flower Shop with a baseball bat. Piper going a little off script and saying that he doesn't want his kids to watch somebody like Adonis, which will be used later on by Razor Ramon and Goldust. Yeah.
Yep, it's true.
And, but you got two guys who are real good friends working the best match they can, and Adrian prematurely gets up off the sleeper hold thinking he's got it won, and they're going to celebrate, and Jimmy's jumping into his arms. Everything's great. And in comes somebody looking for a little bit of revenge on Beefcake or on Adonis for embarrassing him.
Brutus, and you get the worst hedge clipper thing in the history of man. Here it comes. Ready? Clink. Boom.
That was the best. Okay, so for people just listening, adorable Adrian Adonis has the hedge clippers, goes to hit Piper with it. It hits the ropes and botches himself in the head. And this going back to our Mania of Wrestlemania 2 show, I talked about how like him versus Uncle Elmer to me was the most hilarious thing ever because fucking Adonis is bumping like Shawn Michaels in that match. This fatty threw himself everywhere but over the moon. And it's great. And then you hear like, Pat and I talked about this, and Chris, you can weigh in on this and then talk about the match itself. how like some guys don't get it. They don't get what the WWE is becoming. This really broad, almost vaudevillian entertainment act, and so a lot of guys are kind of struggling with that because they're still in the mindset of territorial wrestling, whereas the WWE is becoming a cartoon essentially. And like other guys are like, yes, this is my moment. Is not adorable Adrian Adonis like maybe second to Hulk Hogan in really understanding what this is supposed to be and how they're supposed to be acting? He's so good in this role. He's so cartoony and over the top. What a character. I'm sorry they couldn't get more out of him, but as far as like early guys who really got it and set the tone of the WWF, almost no one better than adorable Adrian Adonis, and this match is prime example of that.
Well, Adrian's hero was Dr. Jerry Graham, who, much like Adrian, was a guy who could bump and do everything in the ring, but didn't take care of himself and got grossly out of shape.
Right.
Died young, albeit under different circumstances. But Adrian here is in a punishment gimmick, essentially. That's what this was for him. They did this to maybe wake him up and be like, hey, Adrian, if you get yourself back into shape, you don't have to do this. And instead, he just chose to own it and milk it and not work out and keep eating candy bars and just still be a great performer.
Him and the Junkyard Dog were like, fuck you. I'm going to lean into being a fatty do-nothing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
make millions of dollars in the process, or thousands of dollars.
And of note, we saw the clip earlier, Roddy's running to the ring in this one. This is the first WrestleMania where they used motorized carts to bring the guys back and forth to really add to the spectacle. I do miss that a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, so
Roddy gets it's time. It's his cue. He's got to go out, and the entryway is a long way away. And they're like, the cart's malfunctioning. We can't get it to work. And Roddy goes, if I can't get to the ring, how the hell am I supposed to go out and have a match? Screw it. Let's just go. And Roddy just jogs to the ring, and he's doing like a little bit of shadow boxing as he's jogging.
Oh, so good. So good.
Yeah, it was so cool. Like again, Roddy's presentation. Everybody, when they talk, I got a match, or Roddy, I got a fight. I've been fighting. Yeah. And just the ultimate, character regard in that respect. And he just that's what always set Roddy apart. We talk about how certain guys, their gimmick was that, hey, I'm real. Look at Bruno in the 70s when you have Chief Jay Strongbow. And Bruno is real. I'm Bruno. Roddy, even though he's wearing the kilt and coming out, Roddy's Roddy. I'm a man. I fight.
Yep. All right, Chris, go ahead. Your thoughts on this angle, this match, these guys.
Well, you've got a situation here where you've got a person who's probably more popular than Hulk Hogan on this card, and that's Roddy Piper. That face turn was absolutely monstrous for this. You know what I mean? Piper's fresh off of going into They Live, I should say, ready to become, a Hollywood, B-movie sensation that we'd see right now. But man, that jog to the ring, the electric crowd, that the face turn in general was so well done. I mean, I remember he's fighting the Iron Sheik on Saturday night's main event on crutches after this. After
Morales is the sub Piper.
Yes.
Move!
Oh,
Move!
So good. And I mean, Piper's presentation. Listen, this was one of the matches I cried during. Like a little girl, I cried like a baby. They did My Way, like a tribute video to Roddy Piper on Saturday night's main event.
Yeah.
I cried like a baby. I was so into Roddy Piper. I had my Hot Rod t-shirt going to school. I was all in on this one. I couldn't believe that Roddy Piper was retiring just as I got to love him. Just so good.
If given the opportunity, Chris Bailey would have been the guy who jumps into the ring after the match to hug Roddy and celebrate with him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you know it, man. We got to go and do that, man.
What's funny about that is Roddy just gave him a hug and was like, okay, thanks. And if it had happened today, they'd beat the living piss out of him. Like, I love you, Roddy.
The Detroit PD had some fun with him.
And one of the comments before we close up this shop, so the Clippers apparently were not good enough to get through Adonis's mane, and he's really torturing Adonis because these things cut out. They're battery operated. And, when you're going through a mane like Adonis got on there, especially mixed with sweat, this is a complete disaster. So hence they had to switch it up. They had to use scissors. So that's when Beefcake enters in at the very end of this one. Roddy wins with Goodnight Irene, and Beefcake all of a sudden becomes the barber at the end of this one. Here he is waking Roddy up. He's going to wake him up, and he's going to slap Goodnight Irene.
I was so confused by that because he runs and punches him in the back of the head, and it's like, get up, Roddy, get up, as he's hitting him in the back of the head. I'm like,
you have to get the blood flow into the carotid artery to reawaken itself after the oxygen has been depleted.
Sure.
That's how it works.
Let me try that. Let me try that with my wife or somebody. Like, I punched you in the back of the head to wake you up.
No, you have to put him to sleep first, though. It only works after a sleeper hold.
It's not going to be a problem.
Mark, the next podcast, I want you to get a pair of the pink Adrian Adonis shorts with the Vienna sausage in the front. Please.
I will. Hey, listen. Under the right opportunity, I will come with the whole full regalia.
We're talking shorts. I do have my Simply Ravishing Rick Rude.
Let's get a Hibble Swift.
Nice.
Well done for the ladies, Pat. No, you're
well
down
done.
Again. I'll come with the old lady crown, the flower hat, the pink. I'll do drag. I don't care. It's 2021.
Love it. Hilarious.
All right, moving on. The next one, and I'm going to need an explanation here, Pat. Danny Davis and the Hart Foundation are against Tito Santana and the British Bulldogs. They beat him in about 9 minutes in a 6-man tag. I know we just did the Dark Side of the Ring on Dynamite Kid, so we know why Dynamite Kid is involved in a 6-man here. They're just trying to drag him through this match. Why is Danny Davis here? Where is this evil referee thing coming from? Tell the story.
More than a year build to this on this one, Mark.
Molten hot angle here.
I remember the evil referee, Dangerous Danny Davis.
Yes, who among his dastardly deeds in January, he was the referee who basically handed the World Tag Team Championships to the Hart Foundation from the British Bulldogs by just allowing them to do any which thing they wanted to, including a megaphone assault on Dynamite before the match, which kept him out of the match completely because Dynamite, of course, is very injured and needed back surgery. But this has been building for a long time, going all the way back to the Boston Garden on February 4th of 1986, where in a match between Tito Santana, the defending Intercontinental Champion, and Randy Macho Man Savage, the challenger, Danny Davis willfully turned a blind eye to Randy Savage using a flagrant foreign object to KO Tito and take the title. And ever since that moment, Danny'd been doing these things, disqualifying Dick Slater at random in a match against Jake Roberts for no reason, repeated instances of it. So finally, his corruption made its zenith move to give the Harts the tag team titles. And Jack Tunney had had enough and suspended him for life as a referee, leading to the Hart Foundation and Jimmy Hart saying, he doesn't need to be a referee. He's going to be a wrestler. And Danny Davis had been a wrestler to this prior to being a referee. He had wrestled under a mask as Mr. X, mostly in the New England area, a little bit with the WWF before becoming a full-time referee. So they went with the angle of turning him into the world's most dangerous referee, into the world's most dangerous wrestler. And he did good in the part. Danny was never going to be more than a C-level talent, but the context of it and everything, I think he did reasonably well with everything.
Is this the same Danny Davis that Jim Cornette keeps referring to when he
talks
about?
No.
No. Okay, different Danny Davis. Okay, so this is one where they're just trying to get the Dynamite Kid through it. This is the culmination of the angle that Pat talked about. Chris, your thoughts on this crazy 6-man tag?
Oh my God! I mean, the intensity just to build with Danny Davis alone. I mean, the Hart Foundation match where they won the championship. Was one of the only few matches as a kid where I threw something at my TV. I was unshakably upset. You got to understand, I'm a Steiner Brothers fan back in the day, and I mean the Bulldogs were the Steiner Brothers early 80s. I'm telling you right now, power team, loved them. They had Matilda. I was into the entire package. Ronald, Matilda. But anyway, I was really into this, and Tito Santana as well. I could not wait. Because all these guys, all three people, were all screwed by Danny Davis at some point or another. And, I mean, you could see Tito just laying it in. So the entire match is based around getting, comeuppance against Danny Davis. Because the tag titles are not even on the line here at WrestleMania, which is shocking. But not only that, the Bulldogs lose. You talk about another outrage. What the hell? Who's booking this shit?
So Dynamite, shortly after this is gone, Bulldog's going to go into a singles thing. Dangerous Danny Davis, I don't think, has too much longer in this gimmick before he puts back on the referee uniform.
Oh, didn't he get another 2 years out of this?
He got about another year and a half before he earns his good graces back and becomes a referee again that they quietly mention on TV.
And then how much longer after this is the Hart Foundation together before Brett starts to go solo, Pat?
Another 4 years.
Another 4 years. Okay.
They tease it. They tease it at WrestleMania 4, the breakup, but they don't go through with it.
They put them. They do split them for a little while between 4 and 5, but reunite them at 5, and then they go forward as
I remember seeing a lot of the buildup of this on TV, so I do have a lot of memories of this going into this WrestleMania 3. I also will tell you, rewatching it, my favorite part of this is just the introductions of these guys and Danny Davis walking around.
With that suit, with that striped suit.
Just puffing his chest out, just the cock of the walk. He's the smallest guy in the match, but he's the shit, man. He's like, I am invincible. Like, okie dokie.
Yep.
So this is a fun match. This definitely needed to be on the show. It was good that it was here. One of the better matches on the show, I think. Right, Pat?
I would agree with that.
Definitely. Work rate wise, huge.
All right. The next one is Butch Reed versus Coco Beware. This is a squash match basically for Butch Reed, just a premier match to get him over. Butch Reed meant to be a star, doesn't quite work out that way over the next 2 years, as we'll briefly talk about and get more into in the next show. This is less than 4 minutes, and
Which got cut down in time because of the aftermath of Roddy Piper, Adrian Adonis.
I'm surprised that it went 4 minutes. I think the Coliseum VHS tape cuts it even more significant. I don't think it even goes 4 minutes.
Yeah, I remember it being like 2.5 on the Coliseum video.
Cut to pieces.
So just real quick, Pat, talk a little bit about, where Coco is and what his role is in the company for this match and what the plans were for Butch Reed.
I love Coco. He had just come over from Mid-South a little less than a year ago, but he's essentially going to be used as a stepping stone jobber to the Stars role that we've come to call it as. Coco is going to be over with the crowd, singing, got Frankie with him, great athlete, can still to this day my favorite drop kick of all time. But he's essentially there to help elevate the next heels to that level by putting them over strong. And Reed, you said there were big plans for him at this point in time. The natural Butch Reed with his blonde hair, a fantastic take on the Sweet Daddy Siki gimmick. Great for the time. Butch, again, huge star in Mid-South too, as well as Florida he had worked in for a while. So they loved his look. They loved his background. They loved his athleticism. Paired him with Slick, who I thought he had great chemistry with.
Oh, yeah.
And Butch could go. Butch was a really good in-ring performer and a strong guy to boot.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's a natural matchup that makes sense. These guys know each other from the territory days. They can work together. Coco can get him over. Sadly, we didn't get a lot of it, but, we got Tito ripping apart Slick at the end of it.
Yep.
That's the moment right here. So, I mean, nothing really to say about this one other than, Slick gets his uniform torn to pieces here and Reed gets the win, which it should be. So there you go.
Yeah. I think this was, more so than the first two. This is try to get everybody on the roster on the card. Like we talked about that with Mania 1 and 2. There were guys on the roster did not make the show.
Absolutely.
This one, it's like, who do we got? Let's get them on there. We'll find a spot for them. And this again, in front of the the biggest indoor crowd they could get at the time, they're going to try to make a star. We need to at some point talk a little bit more at length about Butch Reed and what all happened to him because he is one of the very definitions of missed opportunity.
We also need to talk about the missed opportunity of them just not paying Prince for the rights to always use Morris Day and the Times, the Bird, as Coco's entrance song. Because it was so much fun when he had that.
So just out of curiosity, how much longer after this before we get Pile Driver?
Same year.
Same year?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Come on, Pat. Pile Driver.
Love it.
I get what you're saying, but Pile Driver.
It sounds like an argument. It sounds just like a pile driver. But
sounds like an argument. Feels like a fight. There's fight in there somewhere. I remember.
Yeah. Sometimes love feels just right. Sounds like an argument. Not argument. Argument. Sounds
argument.
like pile driver.
Jason and the arguments.
But no, come on. You don't beat Coco coming out and doing the Bird to Morris Day and the Time. America and her.
Yeah, so this is also when the WWF was turning into somewhat of a menagerie. We have dogs, we have parrots, we're gonna have an iguana soon.
Snakes,
yeah. I don't know if people know this or not, but the WWF really for children at this time.
Oh yeah,
it really was the World Wildlife Federation.
Yep. All right. So I made my kid watch my 7-year-old son Jonas watch 2 matches on this entire show. This is one of them coming up next. Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Savage, Pat. Talk about how we go from George to Ricky to George and Ricky versus Savage. And a broken neck therein.
Well, crushed larynx. On Superstars in November of 1986, Savage is defending the title against Ricky Steamboat. If you're a regular viewer of Superstars, you're saying, oh, I get that match on TV for free. Because that was not commonplace, especially with 2 in-ring performers the caliber of Steamboat and Savage. You're talking, at this time, arguably the 2 very best the WWF has to offer. Randy's gotten past the animal to a certain extent. He still pines for Elizabeth, but we're not getting the same run around the house shows and everything. We get Savage and Steamboat, and we get this match on Superstars that arguably was shaping up to be better than the match we're going to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a certain point during this match where Steamboat's on the outside, is draped over the guardrail, and Savage, as is typical, comes off with what Gorilla Monsoon always referred to as bombs away when he would drop the double axe handle to the outside. But he does it to Steamboat's throat over the ropes. Steamboat sells the hell out of this thing, grabbing his throat, rolling, can't breathe, doesn't understand what's going on, rolls into the ring, and Savage, being Savage, takes the ring bell, climbs to the top, and rather than deliver an elbow or deliver anything, he takes the edge of the ring bell and drives it into Steamboat's throat, trying not only to win the match, but end the career and possibly the life of Ricky Steamboat. And what they had here was something where they knew they could have this 5-star match with these two guys, but they needed to do more than that to really get people invested in it. Steamboat was a guy who was always over due to his ability in the ring, and he does have a natural charisma about him because of his look and his presence and little things he could do, like when he would hit the chop in the ring, he'd almost strike a pose basically when he did it, and just did little stuff like that to set him apart. Savage, who they know is just a total package, charisma, working ability, promos, everything, could get anything over with what he could do. And what this leads to is they have this swell of sympathy for the Dragon. He's got to do something. And it leads to people like Bruno Sammartino being outraged and attacking Savage, and he's going to work a little bit with Savage on the Boston Garden loops. People like George Steele, who are reemerging as people upset with what Randy tried to do to Ricky. And you have Steamboat on TV doing speech therapy.
Yeah, it was great.
It's great and terrible at the same time. You have them choosing poorly to interview Steamboat's wife, Bonnie.
Boy, isn't that the WWF, though? Great and terrible at the same time.
Yeah,
it is.
And we get all this build. And then finally, Savage is wrestling George Steele in a match on Saturday night's main event. And Chris, I know, remembers this, where Elizabeth is basically sitting in a lifeguard chair where Elizabeth will leave with the winner, because this is the 80s. It's okay to do that with women. And we get out of nowhere. Steamboat emerges looking for revenge, and the crowd is souped. They're like, oh, my God, he's back. We haven't seen him. It's the Dragon. Has his comeback match on Saturday night's main event against the Iron Sheik. The people go nuts that he's back in wrestling. It was unreal. And the build to this was so good. And they have a match in the Maple Leaf Gardens on their tryout run building to this. If you've never seen it, look this match up. I believe it's actually Valentine's Day at the Maple Leaf Gardens, 1987. What a match. But you say that anytime these two guys meet. And this, of course, being the zenith of that.
So, all right. Chris, I want to get into the match itself, but before we do, I just want to remind people of one of our great sponsors, which is Grammarly. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Now, Chris, this is often regarded as, at least for the WWF, the most widely seen best workers match of its era. I do want to talk about that, but that is the context in which this is put in, of the style going on at the time, and of the style going on at the time, especially in the WWF, of the kinds of people we have wrestling in that era. This is the best worked match widely seen on the biggest stage going in the 80s leading into the 90s. Go ahead. Yeah,
you got to talk about work rate when you talk about this. I mean, you're coming off a match where we just had, midgets, Hillbilly Jim, and King Kong Bundy. And now all of a sudden we're shifting gears. I mean, Roddy Piper and Adrian Adonis, they're no work rate specialists, but they can go in the ring. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden you've got a absolutely phenomenal work rate match here. Frenetic pace, move after move, perfectly, crowd psychology all over the place. Just this was the pinnacle of the WWE. It didn't get any better than this whatsoever on any show. And this stole the complete thunder away from Hogan. and Andre a little bit later on. I mean, people went for the Giant versus the Hulkster, and they left talking about Steamboat and Savage. I mean, this was epic, and I knew it as a kid watching it in grade 7.
This bump we're about to see.
Oh, watch this!
Oh.
Whoa!
Can you tell for people listening what just happened?
So basically, they whipped him off the ropes. He's running. Savage is running towards Steamboat inside the ring. Steamboat ducks down and gives him a back body drop over the top rope, the likes of which you've never seen.
Not your safe little, I'm going to hang onto the ropes and land on the apron and roll to the floor. No, I'm going straight up in the air, full extension over the top to the floor.
Unbelievable.
This match, like this is one, and I've heard, the funny part is I've heard other guys talk about this, like who are actual successful professional wrestlers that we would know by name. And, oh, God, I love Steamboat jumping over the referee to chop Savage. My God.
So good.
But this is one that me and a friend of mine, like, could interact and reenact, like, move for move, because we just watched it so many times and we loved it so much because we had never seen anything like it.
So I'm going to spoil the pudding just a bit. I'm going to pee in the soup. I was talking to Chris on Twitter about this, and, I watched this match, and look, there are some very athletic, deep arm drags. There's some gymnastics in this that look great. And I would say, I think the match gets inflated, overvalued, because it's up against the Hillbilly Jim midget match, and Adonis and Piper flip-flopping all over the ring and everything. I think it's a low bar to clear, and they cleared it so high it often gets, like, I think, unfairly promoted. Is it the best match of its time for the WWF? Yes. Sure, I'm not arguing that point, but people still put it up against a lot of modern wrestling, and I'm going to make the argument, and we don't need to go into this too much right this second, but I'm going to make the argument after rewatching this today, it's not as good as Angle Benoit, which to me sets the gold standard for pure technical work rate wrestling.
You got lust in your eyes, huh? See it right there, yeah.
What, brother? I look, you guys. Make your points, and then we can move this on. I'm okay with a counter argument.
I can understand the preference of Angle Benoit in the modern world we live in, where MMA is very popular and there's a lot of chain exchanges and things like that. I will counter with, as much as I love those matches, or at least did, there is a distinct lack of selling in certain points of them that kind of take you out of the moment, where they're just transitioning German suplex to German suplex, and there's no real, I just ate 2 German suplexes, but I'm immediately going to hit the switch, and I'm going to hit you with 3, and we're fine. And then, I know, and I'll even go to Shawn Michaels Undertaker, because I know people are raving about that as the best match ever. I saw 2 guys laying on the floor a lot in that match. This match,
absolutely,
they still sell, and there's consequences to each step while still maintaining a frenetic pace. The match is about 14 minutes and change, if I recall correctly. There's 23 near falls in that time, none of which look silly to me. And the psychology is there. And the only thing people have constantly crapped on in this match is the interference of George Steele at the end and how it plays in. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with that because it makes so much sense to the story.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, they built it. They built towards it. Absolutely. It 100% makes sense.
You have all this past context with George and Savage. You have Savage trying to use the ring bell again to permanently injure Steamboat. So he offsets that by doing what he did and shoving Savage off the ropes. Savage ramming himself with the bell on the way down is his own fault for bringing the bell in.
Right.
And while he's still got the advantage, Steamboat beats him with a wrestling move, playing off of that. I don't think it's the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. Mm-hmm. I don't. Do I think it's one of them? Absolutely. Do I think it gets undervalued in today's world? Absolutely.
Really? I still hear people raving about this match of it was the best match in 2 decades of WWF wrestling. It was all garbage except for this one. We don't start having good matches until the mid to late 90s.
This was the bar, and the bar was set very high between these 2 guys. It's very hard to compete with that. And there's good matches, don't get me wrong, on WrestleManias that we'll see after this. Mm-hmm. Nothing that really captures my imagination as such, unless it involves Randy Savage.
I would tell
this is kind of the genesis of him as Mr. WrestleMania for a while.
And Chris, and I'll let you talk about this, and then we'll move on. I think this definitely checks all the boxes. There's drama. there's heroism, there's story, there's obviously great wrestling. There, this fires on all cylinders, and I get all that. And maybe Angle Benoit is missing a little bit of that. And I think Pat's probably right. There was probably a little less selling in that match than there is in this one. But I don't know. I'll let you kind of say your piece and then we'll move on.
So the reason why Angle Benoit doesn't resonate with me, because it's in a time when, these kick-out matches, these frenetic pace matches are part of the culture. It's nothing new. They didn't innovate. Right here, this is innovation, because this is only things that you've seen in the NWA territory at the time. You know what I mean? NWA were presenting really solid matches with Flair over there, doing the same type of spiel. But let me tell you something. For WWF at the time, this was absolutely not what was on your screen. You had a couple people doing some magic stuff like the Dynamite Kid and a few other work rate guys. But this, when it came to two competitors locking horns, I don't think there was anything better. And the reason why I think it gets so much praise, it exists in a time when this didn't happen. And Benoit and Angle was in a time when that was commonplace. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a great match, but it's a great match among 900 others. You had superstars breaking out at the time of that match that was happening, like Rey Mysterio innovating, Frankensteiners and all that type of thing that were just, into the arsenal pretty well every wrestler. So, the big moves, the repetitious German suplexes and all that stuff, you saw it all before. So, they did nothing new. They just did it very well.
So I said to my son at the time, I said, this guy, as he referred to him as Street Fighter guy, Ricky Steamboat's going to go on to have a series of matches with Ric Flair that everyone, I think more so than this one, I think this is the best WWF match, but there are people who say that Steamboat Flair is the best wrestling matches of this era of wrestling, far and wide, anything captured on film. And I'll give you a chance to respond to that, Chris, and then we'll move on to Jake and Honky.
Oh, wait, listen, with Steamboat Flair?
Steamboat Flair versus Savage Flair. Which one's better?
Oh, Savage Flair. I love this. I love the trilogy of Steamboat Flair.
Savage Steamboat.
Savage Steamboat, I should say. Savage Steamboat is probably my favorite, but listen, that trilogy between, or not trilogy, they wrestled many more times than a trilogy, but what they're known for is the trilogy with Savage and Steamboat and Flair, and those matches were epic, but I still like this one better.
All right, next match, another feud coming to a culmination. The Honky Tonk Man with Colonel Jimmy Hart versus Jake Roberts with rock and roller Alice Cooper. Pat, give it to me. What's the story behind this?
You got to have an equalizer to that damn Jimmy Hart at ringside, so why not bring in one of Detroit's favorite sons, who's right about in Jimmy's weight class, Alice Cooper, who at the time is enjoying a career renaissance after the release of Constrictor in 1986, where he really rechristened himself in the heavy metal scene and found a whole new audience, and his career kind of just went onward and upward at this point, which was awesome because Alice Cooper's great. But here we have one of the first real double switch angles that we've ever seen, where Honky Tonk came in as a beloved babyface, or so they wanted him to be, shaking hands and smiling and doing his Elvis gimmick, and he's going to rock and roll. Whereas Jake was a very devilish heel who put snakes on people and talked about evil things in his snake pit. And we had a multi-layered turn here with the Honky Tonk Man getting a 1-800 vote of confidence.
Yes.
And losing the vote to the people, much the way Jason Todd would shortly thereafter. So Honky, in response, gets very negative and is booked as a guest on the Snake Pit with Jake. Jake, who is always presented as a very serious character, if nothing else, cannot stand this idiot and is repeatedly telling him that his voice stinks, he can't play guitar, and Honky responds by walking away and coming back and El Kabonging Jake with the guitar. And it didn't necessarily, again, change the character of Jake so much as it had, we like Jake because he's going to beat this clown up. And, of course, Jake would say that the guitar was gimmicked poorly and led to his drug problems and all that, but whatever. And but what we got was a very smartly executed turn where they could capitalize on this kind of dark edge character that there were definitely a fan support of for Jake at the time, even as a heel.
Yeah.
And allow this goofball Honky character to find his niche as this heel that people love to hate. and pair him with Jimmy Hart, which to me is one of the great manager character pairings of all time because they just work so well together, especially like again, you talk about chemistry. Those two guys together, chemistry.
So, yeah, this was a fun match. I enjoyed it. I've always liked Jake the Snake Roberts. I've always liked Honky Tonk Man.
But no happy endings for you guys because Jake loses.
Which was a shocker. Holy crap.
He also didn't need to win this match. Jake didn't need to win any. He's one of those rare guys that was going to be over no matter what he did, no matter how many matches he won or lost. It was almost irrelevant. But I remember loving the Honky Tonk Man gimmick as a kid. I thought it was hilarious. I loved Jake the Snake as a kid. As far as you need, I was talking about Adrian Adonis before. These two guys get it too. They're part of that small group of guys in the WWF at the time that understand the medium and played into it perfectly and were a perfect fit for the WWF. Chris, what were your thoughts on this match?
Okay, really quick. The promo to set this thing up. You're talking where Jake is backstage and he does the Alice Cooper interview. One of my favorite all-time Jake the Snake promos. And just the way he leaves it off when he says, "And I'm going to have my way with you, my man." And I was just like, goosebumps. Anyway, the next day, right after WrestleMania, we could not wait to get to school the next morning. And one of the things, we're going down the results because somebody managed to have the actual pay-per-view. I had to wait for the VHS tape, unfortunately, to see everything. But let me tell you something. When somebody told me that Jake the Snake lost to the Honky Tonk Man, I almost slapped him and said, "Damn liar! Lies!"
Why are you in my office? Why are you in my office, Chris? I slapped a liar is what I did.
I could not believe it. But anyway, this was a great match. And you know what? You saw the genesis of what would become that Honky Tonk Man IC title run here. Mm-hmm. And this was a molten lava hot heel right here. I tell you.
Honky just understands that, and I hate the Memphis territory and 95% of everything about it. But Honky's crowd psychology from that territory is so good and just keeps you entertained.
Definitely. Absolutely.
And, we talk about Jake lost this match. They just showed it in the video. Honky Tonk Man had he cheated to win. This is classic step one in retaining your heat despite a loss. You don't lose fairly. No. Honky Tonk Man held the rope. There was all kinds of interference. I mean, this was
Alice Cooper can barely lift the snake up.
He was struggling.
Because it probably weighs more than Alice did at the time.
This is classic WWE structured high-profile match. Lots of shenanigans.
Look at Jimmy Hart just being the ultimate, self-sacrificing performer. He wants to give the people something to be happy about, so he's going to be the one who takes the snake and the heat.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this is good. And Cooper and Jimmy Hart here at the end was just classic stuff. We love this stuff, man.
Absolutely.
Onwards.
Onward and upwards. We are nearing the end of our show here, and I have questions, Pat, because this is the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, who are with Slick and no longer Classy Freddie Blassie, versus one of my favorite tag teams. They have their own graphic novel and everything. The Killer Bees of B. Brian Blair and Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. And
the second best drop kick of all time behind Coco.
And while I loved the Killer Bees as a kid, what the hell are they doing in the second to last match of the night? I feel like they were in who thought this was a good idea?
Listen, do you remember when they used to stick the ladies just before the main event of WrestleMania? This is the spot.
I get that, but I still think
used to belong to the Bees, Mark.
Maybe they should have swapped this with Morocco, Orton, and
I'm thinking this was the spot for Coco Butch Reed, if anything. But
this was the wrong place. This should have been early on, not right before Hogan and Andre.
But again, we're also talking about a WrestleMania where we've had how many tag team matches now? This would be the fourth.
Yeah.
Look at that lying attendance record. Look at that on the screen. It says 93,173.
Yeah, shut up, Dave Meltzer.
Actual attendance 78,000.
You were saying, Pat.
I heard the name Dave Meltzer and I saw red and I just,
Why is this so high on the card?
But I don't know if it was just placement or they knew that this was going to the angle it would with, you see my man Hacksaw Jim Duggan coming in.
Oh, he was hot at the time.
Refusing to hear that Russian national anthem ever on American soil. But I think it was just because they knew it was more angle than match at this point. And at the time, the Bees are kind of spinning their wheels as a team. Sheiky and Volkov have kind of outlived their use as a top heel team. So I think that's more the idea behind it, even though this is probably going to produce a little bit better of a result than Coco and Butch Reed, especially given how short they cut Coco and Butch Reed too.
Yeah.
And the crowd's still going to be invested, especially with Duggan doing his thing on the outside. But I think the real genesis is that we found out why the Iron Sheik never worked again with Brian Blair on a pay-per-view after this match.
Well, is there a story here we should just go investigate on our own?
So if you have this website called YouTube ever since about the year 2007, you may have heard the Iron Sheik say some things about Brian Blair from time to time.
Okay.
And apparently he just didn't like old Brian. Then there's never really been a reason why, but it comes to this match. And I love that the Bees are wearing the Converses at the time. That's just dope.
Yes. So real quick, and then I want to shift over to Chris here. Any thought as to why Duggan wasn't in the match to begin with? He's just kind of there to hit Sheik with a 2x4?
He doesn't have a partner.
But, okay.
And he had literally just come over from Watts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're going to build to Sheik versus Duggan. They're not just going to give it away.
The answer is he just got there and there wasn't time to put him in a big enough feud.
Yeah.
Well, they needed to really separate Volkov and the Sheik here. So, like you said, now both teams are on the wind down. Even the Killer Bees are on the way out the door here, really. And, to start the Iron Sheik versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan feud, well, he feuded with both guys, but, this is the start of that. So, they're trying to separate these two, and Hacksaw is a big part of that, getting them back into singles mode. So there you go.
Till they hit the New Jersey Turnpike.
It was a good enough match. Like, it's not very long. It's only it's less than 6 minutes.
And I just want to say, I think the Bees are the most underrated team of the 80s.
Yeah, I liked them as a kid.
Young Stallions, baby. Young Stallions.
I told Jesse, Chris, that you wanted to cover that Killer Bees comic book. So, you guys can get on that one.
All right. Listen, I'm going to tell you something else as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mastered that Russian national anthem. Never mind. Anyway,
perfect. Do it in karaoke.
Also, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, one of the 3 favorite wrestlers of my mother.
Oh, there you go. Beauty.
All right, and we get to the main event. This is the big one, Hogan Andre. And so my wife, I was telling Chris this story when we reviewed the last NXT and Impact show, AEW show. I said, she asked me, like, where did that $1 million belt come from? Why is that a thing? And I'm like, well, once upon a time, Hogan got a trophy on Piper's Pit, and 2 hours later, we got to the $1 million belt.
Okay.
I was this close to starting with, well, first the dinosaurs came, and then we got the $1 million belt.
Yes.
But so Pat, starting with Jack Tunney giving Hulk Hogan a trophy for being undefeated for 3 years, how did we get from that to Hogan versus Andre in his biggest, most dangerous challenge yet?
Well, Tunney was in a very giving mood, and so the following week on the same segment, Andre was presented with a trophy that was noticeably smaller for being undefeated for 15 years at this point. Now, Hulk, so proud for his friend, comes out and decides to talk him up and give a best man speech that nobody asked for, particularly Andre. And Andre just kind of gets pissed off, like, this is my moment, why are you the one talking? And just kind of walks off, and we don't see Andre for a little while. And, there's another Piper's Pit between Piper and Jesse the Body. And Jesse's kind of alluding to some stuff that he knows about Andre that he'd blow Piper's mind. And Jesse and Roddy almost come into some fisticuffs, as it were, that people got really excited at the potential of. Unfortunately, we never got that. But basically, Jesse says, well, I tell you what, I'll get Andre here next week. Can you get Hogan? And there's this very climatic moment at the end of the episode where Piper has to go to Hogan and bring up their past and everything that's went on, but says, but he's challenging your manhood to be on the pit. And I'm asking you as a man, will you be on my show? And Hogan, not quite the challenge accepted moment, but definitely gives a yes type of reaction. And we get Hogan and Piper and Jesse, and Jesse is dressed very much like a I don't know how you describe that outfit. I remember watching it like in highlights after I'd first seen it. I'm like, who's that chick and why is she so tall? Oh, that's Jesse Ventura.
Do you get dressed in the dark, madam?
Yeah. And, so we see Andre come out, but Andre doesn't come out alone. Andre comes out with Bobby Heenan.
The Weasel.
And Jesse wearing a buckwheat shirt. I forgot about that. My God. And there's the attire we just spoke about.
Well, he was recently cast in Predator, so he was still, in his Rakondo get up.
Yeah. Anyway,
he just
moving
came from
on.
the set.
Rakondo, very well done. G.I. Joe, way to go.
Hogan, well, Jesse was also in Grenada at one point, but it's the 80s, folks. Hogan, in disbelief that he's standing there with Bobby Heenan, begging Andre, no, whatever this is, we can talk this out. No, and look at me when I talk to you. One reason to challenge you for the World Championship at the WrestleMania.
That's perfect.
And no, brother, no, like Andre, no, brother. And then Andre Heenan with the line, you don't believe it, Hogan? Believe this. Andre grabs that cross in the shirt, yanks it off, accidentally cuts Hogan's chest with his fingernail, which wound up being one of the best things for the angle.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And, walking away, and you get, Piper, you're bleeding. You're bleeding.
Right.
And Hogan's in shock.
Piper was so good during all this setup. He's a big part of this angle, to be quite honest.
Oh, yeah.
With you. And when he's looking at Hogan and he's just going, oh, man, you're bleeding, man. Like, that was so good, man.
I would say the two biggest things that set this really apart were that Piper's Pit and the Battle Royal on Saturday night's main event prior to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Full on fever.
So I watched this with my son, and I told him, I said this, what I said at the top of the podcast, you don't have this match, you don't have modern wrestling. I want to, and I don't want to talk disparagingly. He was a good dude who did a lot of hard work and spent a lot of time doing this and not with, doing other things. Larry Zonka, in his review of like WrestleMania main events, has always put this one down at the bottom. And I know the argument for that, and it's a work rate argument. It's not a well worked match. But Andre can barely move, and Hogan, outside of his work with Savage and maybe like Nick Bockwinkel, not known for his technical acumen. Here's the thing: I think judging this against high work rate main event WrestleMania matches is unfair, and it's almost like comparing a Maserati to a minivan, where the minivan works just fine and does exactly what it's supposed to do, and if you have a Toyota minivan, you'll have it forever. It's a wonderful car. In case Toyota wants to sponsor us, but or like an SUV or something. But you can't compare it to a sports car. They're two different things. And I feel like Hogan and Andre is an outstanding match, considering again, one guy can't move. So like Hogan, not a bump machine, bumps like an idiot for Andre the Giant. There's a spot in this where and we're talking, this is 87, where this is not commonplace, at least not in WWF, where he's pulling up the outside mat and exposing the concrete, and he's going to pile drive big ass Andre the Giant. Of course, he can't do it. And Andre gives him the most slow, awkward, D-to-D fucking backdrop you've ever seen. And Hogan sells it like he was shot in the back.
Oh, definitely.
It's amazing. I watched this with Jonas, and I was like, wow, this is better than I even remember it being as a kid, because I don't care that neither guy is Flair and Steamboat. I care that there's drama involved here, and it's, it's the undefeated Hulk Hogan versus the 15-year undefeated Andre the Giant, who you can't even get this monster off of his feet, and Hogan does it, and it's like he cracked the earth, like he's the Incredible Hulk.
It's true.
It's
so you mind? Pat,
so
do you mind if I go next? I actually got to step away now after I do this quick comment here. Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about Hogan, Andre. They didn't have to do a lot. So when you're talking about Larry's review of putting it at the bottom, I completely disagree with that, because this is exactly what they had to do. You know what I mean? You're seeing on the screen here right now the very quick count, which came into play a little bit later. They used that, so it looked like a 3 count happened early on in the match when Hogan tried to slam Andre, and to use that footage afterwards to further that feud. And Andre claimed to be the winner early on in the match, and I love that they put that little part in there. Part of the package that is not talked about, when Hogan first won the title off the Iron Sheik, they were visionary enough to film Andre the Giant coming in the back and pouring champagne over his head. And he goes to him, "You're very proud of you. You're going to be a good champion," and slaps him on the thing. And I'm like, man, did they have that planned out that far back? And that was crazy, because they have all this footage of the two of them, including the big Stud and Bundy thing on Saturday night's main event, and Hogan coming to the rescue. So much great stuff went into this, and I think they did exactly what they had to do. And like Mark said, when he knocks that giant down, man, it's like the foundation cracked in the earth. And then when he finally put the giant away, I could not have been happier. I left this show a stark raving Hulkamaniac, and I think that was the entire point behind it. I was all in on this thing. Great build and exactly what it should have done. So there you go.
Chris, before you go, give me 50 words on this entire event, and then you can head out.
Absolutely groundbreaking, probably the biggest event of my childhood. I'll never forget the build. I'll never forget the merchandising. I'll never forget the ramifications. And I'll always look back at WrestleMania 3 as the biggest event of probably my entire fandom. You know what I mean? I don't know if anything, this is literally the granddaddy of them all. And that's the way I would like to remember it in my brain of brains, despite having Hillbilly Jim and, midgets.
Next month, I don't know what the exact date is just yet. It's on my calendar, but next month we'll be back. Chris will be back with us, and we'll do both the Trump WrestleManias, WrestleMania 4 and 5, the big 2-year story of the mega powers coming together and then exploding like the Death Star. So Chris will be back for that.
I love hanging with you guys, and great finally getting back in the saddle with Pat too as well. You know, I love it, so I can't wait for WrestleManias 4 and 5, baby. You guys have a good day. Put this one to bed. We'll talk to you guys later.
City, Chris.
All right, take care. Later, brothers.
So, Pat, I've expressed my thoughts on this. I am very favorable towards this match. I think Hogan bumps for Andre very well. Andre in the one bump he takes is awesome. And he sells for Hogan too. It's a lot of kind of, it's a lot of that kind of selling. But again, I don't know what once you've decided we're going with Hogan and Andre, and then Andre's like, I'm practically paralyzed. I can't do this. What do you expect him to do? And I just think this match, I think Savage Steamboat unfairly inflated. I think this one unfairly maligned.
I don't think Savage Steamboat unfair, but I also think this one gets very unfairly maligned. Because again, you knew this was never going to be about what happened in the ring in the sense of, constant bumps and tumbles and all that stuff. This was about the story of everything. And really, we talked about this a little bit. Hulk became a huge media sensation and he was a big personality. But up until this point, Hulk was not the consistent top draw that people like to remember him as throughout the entirety of Hulkamania. Mm-hmm. Okay. There were a lot of arenas where the pattern was you had to do three shots with a guy in one arena, one territory, etc., and you had to sell out all three. And if you didn't, they scrapped the program. Hulk didn't really do that well in the WWF strongholds. He didn't do a lot of three-peats in Madison Square Garden. He really drew very poorly in the Boston Garden early on, and that's a lot of why they had to have Bruno work those shows, because Bruno could still draw there and Hulk really didn't. So it was sparing when he would work those shows. So this was the opportunity where they were really going to establish, no, it's undisputed. Hulk's the man. And between him slamming Andre on this stage, everybody likes to, Andre had been slammed before. Hulk even slammed Andre before. It is what it is. Not to this many people, worldwide, internationally, in this moment, in this scope, with this build, did that happen.
Right. You
can say Stan Hansen did it, Kamala, etc., had done it before, Harley Race. Never to this scope, to this level. And let's be fair, Andre didn't weigh as much then as he does right here. And again, for a functional cripple, like you said, he does everything you can ask of him.
Right.
But this is not about a match to have tons of rewatchability and all kinds of stuff. This is a match about, we're going to put on the two biggest stars, the biggest stage, and have you captured in this moment in time that is highlighted by, I can't drop him. I'm going to slam him, picks him up, and he does it, and the whole arena erupts. Jesse and Gorilla lose their minds. It's one of those things you could say having to be there, but that's not really even the case, because even as a kid, if you were a couple of years behind this and you saw it, you knew the story, it was magical the first time you saw it. And I think there's always that bit of nostalgia that's going to highlight this. This was when everything reached its peak. It didn't get any higher or any better than this.
Yeah, totally agree. Jesse Ventura is my favorite line of the entire pay-per-view. And you got to understand, Jesse's also, got health problems. That's why he's not wrestling. But there's clearly something in the back of Jesse's head, about missed opportunities and gosh, if only my heart worked, the money I could draw with Hogan, because you want to talk about another guy who got it almost immediately and was like the perfect fit for the WWF. And that's all like internal psychological stuff, but it comes out in this one line and it's so good. It's like, it's half heel shtick and half like real thoughts. He goes, and you have to understand the context of the line itself is Hogan has beaten Piper. Hogan has beaten Orndorff. He's beaten Bundy. He has beaten Stud. He's beaten Nikolai Volkov, for Pete's sake. Terry Funk. Hogan, in kind of a Bruno-esque, shorter time period, but Bruno-esque fashion, has cut through every major heel the WWF could put in front of him. And he comes up against Andre the Giant and there's no bigger than Andre the Giant at this point. Who do you have after Andre? Nobody. He is the moon, the earth, the stars. It's not getting bigger than Andre. It does eventually, but at that moment in time, if Hogan can beat Andre, he has conquered the mountain and slain all the dragons. At which point Jesse says, you know what? I might just have to get in there and beat Hogan myself. I almost died, Pat. I just died. I was like, that is the best.
Yeah.
It's such a great line.
You put over
eating everybody, and he's like, "Fuck it, I'll do it myself." He's like Thanos in that moment.
Because you put over backhandedly, as he should. You put over Hogan and everything he's accomplished, but at the same time, you're shrewd enough to get yourself over. Maybe it's time for the body to make a comeback.
Right. Only one man can beat Hulk Hogan, and it's this guy right here, Jesse the Body. It's so good, and he can't. He's not in shape enough.
Sadly, we never got the Jesse comeback due to his health issues, and we only got one Jesse match ever after this. Do you know what that was, Mark?
Which match is that?
So it was for a taping of a pilot of a TV series called Tag Team that Jesse was to star in alongside Roddy Piper, that aired only once on the ABC network. And it was Jesse and Roddy tagged up in a match in the LA Sports Arena in a dark match that was filmed specifically for the show, against, I believe it was Mr. Fuji and Pat Tanaka. Okay.
Yeah, I think you've told me the story before.
Yeah.
So, in summation, Pat, I like the show. This is admittedly better than the first two WrestleManias. I think it deserves all the praise that it does get, but I do also think it's unfairly maligned. I think it's one of the better WrestleManias. There are not great matches on here, but I think overall there's a high quality of matches that are, at the very least, are entertaining. If not, like, again, I'm not a work rate snob, as I've said a zillion times. So for me, this is the first two had matches I either didn't care about or just dragged or kind of like messed up the tempo of the show. WrestleMania 3 is solid all the way through. It is a constant drumbeat of, at the very least, fun, colorful, entertaining matches, ending with a Clash of the Titans where the hero comes out victorious. It's like the most perfectly shot movie. And that's my thoughts on WrestleMania 3.
So good.
Yes. That's my thoughts on WrestleMania 3. And I'll say this last, and then I'll give you the final word, and we'll get out of here. I turned to my 7-year-old son, who's not the biggest fan of wrestling. He likes what he likes, but as I've talked about many times before, he likes the more like violent, colorful stuff, and he's not so much into, traditional wrestling. But I made him watch this because I thought it was historically important for a 7-year-old to have watched this match. And I turned to him. I'm like, "So what did you think?" And he was like, "I liked it." And I was like, "Huh?" Like, I was expecting him to be like, I was bored. But I'm like, "Well, why did you like it, Jonas?" He was like, "It was just really good. I really liked it. I liked that the hero came out in the end and that and that it looked like he was going to get beat a bunch. And it was a fun match for me to watch." I'm paraphrasing, and it was like, wow, watch wrestling with children. It's the best.
Or the worst. But no, this WrestleMania 3, to me, it's kind of them figuring out, like, okay, we want WrestleMania to not only be a spectacle, we want it to be the show of shows in every respect possible. Because they saw so many elements from here that got such critical either results or praise. Look at the result of Hogan and Andre being in an arena together. 93,000 people. Not only that, you get this moment in time of the slam and the leg drop and the pin that everybody talks about. You get, on the critical end of it, you get Savage Steamboat, which is the match of matches that people set their WWF good match bar to for the next 15 years, roughly, give or take.
I was going to say 30 years. We're into 2020 and still happening.
Yeah, and it still comes up, yeah. You get that. You get a lot of the colorful personalities presented. You get the celebrity effects still in play. You get, you know, it really was, to me, this is Vince realizing what his real vision for WrestleMania was. Everything all together as one show, a Super Bowl of wrestling that has something for everyone, so everyone will watch. And is it the best WrestleMania ever? Objectively, I think you can make the argument for it. Absolutely. It isn't my favorite ever, but that's nitpicking. I love the show. I think it's great. I think it's one of the 5 best they've ever put together for sure. But again, something is here for everybody. There's a ton of good talent, ton of entertaining action, entertaining personalities, the scope and spectrum, and even how it's shot and filmed to get onto that end of it. Those wide shots of the arena that you didn't often get with thousands of people there standing, cheering, doing all these things. It's incredible.
It's like Munson said, it's a happening.
It was a happening.
All right. So the next time we do this will be sometime in the month of August, I believe. I don't remember the exact date. I know that in August, we are definitely doing the Unsolved Mysteries of Ric Flair's WWF run. That's on the calendar. And eventually we'll get to, it might be September now that I think about it. Let me look here. All right. There it is. Yes. The Mania of WrestleMania. No, that's 6. Sometime in August, goddammit, we will do the Mania of WrestleMania 4 and 5. Oh, there it is. Jesus, right in front of me. August 11th. August 11th, same time. Myself, Chris Bailey, and Pat Mullin will be back together again. We'll do both Trump shows back to back. The Mania of WrestleMania 4 and 5. In the meantime, we've got shows up for the Mighty Ducks, Game Changers, Black Widow, Deadly Origin, our 2.5 hour review of Black Widow. Jesse dropped a What If the Punisher Killed Spider-Man. Jesse and I reviewed 3 movies in less time it took to review 1 Black Widow. We reviewed Gunpowder Milkshake, No Sudden Move, and The Misfits. Tomorrow, Alexis and I will be...
Wait, the Marilyn Monroe Clark Gable Misfits?
No, it's Pierce Brosnan, and it came out in June. Well, Space Jam comes out tomorrow, the 16th. We'll have a Looney Tunes Season 2 review. And then on Saturday, there's WB Animation Tripped Up Trivia. On Sunday, myself and Jason Teasley will have a triple feature for America the Motion Picture, Team America World Police, and Nerdland. And then we get into Space Jam stuff. First, myself and Chris Bailey and Harry Broadhurst will be reviewing Money in the Bank and Slammiversary. And then myself and Sean Comer will review the 3 Fear Street movies currently on Netflix. And then we'll have a review of Space Jam, A New Legacy. We'll have a review of Scooter, God Save the Rave on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And then finally, closing out the week, we'll have our on trial for the new Space Jam, A New Legacy. That'll be me and Sean Comer again. All right, so check us out on if you saw the video and you're like, okay, but I gotta listen to podcasts while I'm driving or when I'm running or whatever. You can check us out on Apple or Spotify. There's a link tree tells you you can get the show anywhere you listen to podcasts. We are on all of them. But if you need help finding it, click the link tree. All right, until the next Mania for WrestleMania, which is the next time you'll see Pat or our Unsolved Mysteries for Ric Flair. This has been the Mania of WrestleMania 3. Be well, be safe, and behave.